growing experiment 1, where you will learn how to root basil cuttings in water. For this experiment you need a few things. This is all outlined in your manual. You will need 2 glasses, preferably glasses that are the same. You will need a couple of small sheets of tin foil. Just ordinary tin foil does the trick. You will need something sharp to cut the stems. You could use a scissors if it's sharp. It's a good sharp blade. You will also need a Sharpie and something like a barbecue skewer to poke a hole in the top of the tin foil. The first thing you need to do is set up your glasses. You will have 2 glasses. One will be the dark glass. That will mean that the entire glass will be covered in tin foil, and so the roots that form on your cuttings will be completely in the dark. The other glass will be your light glass, and it will just have a covering of tin foil at the top, meaning that the roots in the light glass will be exposed to light. So you can set up your tin foil on your glasses as follows. Find your tin foil. You want to fold it over a few times so it's a little bit stronger. And then push it down over the glass so that it acts like a lid for the glass. Now this is going to be our light glass. We don't want any of this tin foil folding down over the side of the glass, so we'll need to cut the sides off that. So plenty of light can hit those roots. What we need to do next is fill those glasses right to the top with simple tap water or your spring water. What you'll need to do next is to put 4 holes in the top of each one of the glasses in through the tin foil. Make sure the holes aren't too big or too small. If they are too small, they will pinch and damage the stems when you put the stems down through the holes. If they are too large, they won't hold the cutting very securely. We are now ready to prepare our cuttings. This is a basil plant. You will find these basil plants in any of the supermarkets, and they are really quite cheap. So in the German retailers are usually around about $1.49. I have pre-watered this plant to make sure that all the cells are nicely turgid and aren't suffering for any kind of drought effects before I take my cuttings. I've already used some of this for a pizza. There's still loads left. And I will simply use a scissors just to take them out of the pot so that they're a little bit easier to work with. So I'm cutting just above the soil line. So you need to examine your cuttings for signs of damage. So I would not use
something like that for my experiment. So discard something like that. Sure, there's some nice healthy stems in this pot. And you'll notice that most of these pots at this time of year have put on around about 2 or 3 nodes of growth. There's one node, and there's another node, and here's another one at the top. So they're all true leaves, true photosynthetic leaves, whereas these small little leaves down here, you can see there's only one left on there, that there is a cotyledon. That's the cotyledon, so that's in the seed cotyledon, which is sort of amazing because basil seeds are so small. These two structures exist inside a basil seed. Now we need to organise cuttings of around about the same size and give them a second cleaner cut at the end of the stem. Before you make the final cut on the stem of your cuttings, it's important to leave enough stem so that enough of this length of stem can reach down into the water in the glasses. You want to take your cutting above this cotyledon node, but hopefully below the first node. And this is the first node of growth. And you want it to be at least 6 centimeters. So it's a good idea to use a ruler here to give yourself the best possible chance of success in your first attempt. For this final cut, it is also very important to use a sharp blade, the sharpest blade that you can find. I know in some pharmacies you can buy these sharp blades, or you can buy scalpels, and I highly recommend you using the sharpest blade. The reason for that is that this is a herbaceous plant, and therefore it has quite a soft stem. And when the stem is cut, if you don't use a sharp blade, what will happen is you will squash all of those important conduits that are extending right from the bottom of the stem here right up through the plant. What I'm talking about here is the xylem, which conducts water, and the phloem, which conducts the food. You definitely want to make sure that the xylem remains open, and to do that, a really good sharp blade will do the trick. It also has to be clean. This is a new one, so I shouldn't run into any problems with cleanliness here. To very carefully pop these cuttings into the glasses. Certainly make sure that you don't force in the stems. If the holes in your tinfoil are a little bit too small, you can simply just make them a little bit larger. Extremely important now is that you check to make sure all 4 stems are sitting down in the water. It looks like they are in that light glass. And you must also do the same for the dark glass. Don't assume that all of those stems are definitely sitting into the water. Just make sure that you definitely check. yourself success. Over the course of your experiment, it's very important to check to make sure that you don't have any disease of the foliage, or indeed that the foliage is starting to wilt. If the foliage is starting to wilt, what has probably happened is that the stems aren't actually sitting into the water anymore. So you can simply just top up the water, or if the wilt is particularly bad, you might just have to discard that cutting. In your manual, I mention that one of your cuttings is going to be used to take measurements, and really the other 3 cuttings are likely to be insurance cuttings, because from time to time things can go wrong. Foliage can get infected, or it can wilt because of not being in the water, and you might lose a few of these cuttings. And we sort of expect that to happen. So you'll have 1 cutting which you'll probably take measurements from, and the other 3 will be insurance. During your experiment, it's very important to check to make sure that the water remains clear. If it is starting to get a little bit cloudy, that indicates that there is bacterial or fungal growth in the water. And that's not a good thing for your experiment, because obviously that bacteria could clog the xylem vessels and hinder water movement. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to change the water in the glass, I think every 3 to 4 days. Next, you need to find a south-facing window and place your glasses in the window where they won't be disturbed. Finally, in case your glasses are moved, or indeed when you have to move your glass to take your readings, you must mark on the glass the direction from which the light is coming. I find that the best way to do that is to get a permanent marker and to draw an arrow pointing towards the window. But extend that arrow all the way down the side of the glass so that you're able to line up your experiment if you do ever have to move it again. So this is the orientation that these glasses should always return to. Because remember, we're trying to evaluate the effect of light on root growth. So this is what your experiment should look like when it's all set up. Remember, make sure that the tin foil around the dark glass is tight. You won't see much in these glasses for at least 6 days. Don't be worried if you don't get root growth by 6 days. Each one of these plants is at a different stage of its development. Some plants are larger, some are smaller. Some are planted in different mediums, so we'll have a little bit more nutrients than maybe other plants. And this all affects how quickly the plant can produce new roots at the ends of these stems. And you'll also find that the roots won't only emerge at the end of the stem, but they'll also emerge right the whole length of the stem, in fact. For more details on how to take your measurements and when to take your measurements and what to look out for when you are starting to take your measurements, read the instructions in the manual really carefully, especially the section on recording results, because that will explain in full what to look out for and when to start measuring and how to start measuring. I think when you're doing an experiment like this, it really helps to know what you're aiming for or what you should expect. So this is what your light glass looks like when it's newly set up. And this is what your light glass should look like in around about 2 weeks. 2 weeks and maybe a little bit more time. So you can see there that there's been a lot of root growth on these cuttings. to take your measurements can be a little bit messy in that you might get a little bit water on you, but it's actually quite easy. So what you do is you obviously take a note of where the arrow is pointing, and you pick up your, simply just take it out, and you're going to pick the longest route. So if I was to hold it straight, that there is the longest route. So I'm just going to measure this route from the stem to the tip of the root. It might mean you might need to excavate it just a tiny bit. So where it emerges from to the tip of that root, and it is approximately 3.9 centimeters. Let's call that 4 centimeters. Okay, and then you can simply just pop the cuttings back into the water, and there's really no need to move the glasses at all.